Okay, it's 10 o'clock, so we'll get things kicked off here. First, I want to say thanks to everybody for joining the webinar today. We have Anthony Wilkes with us, who will be presenting on managing hazard communication and SDS program. As we go along, I'm going to be trying to monitor the chat and the Q&A. So if you have any questions, then please pop those over there. I'll try to keep up with that. And if anybody has anything, that we don't get covered, I'll try to wrap up at the very end and let everybody be able to have the chance to ask questions. So Anthony, without any further ado, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Brooks. Again, like you said, my name is Anthony Wilkes. I'm one of the senior consultants with Life and Safety Consultants. I've had the good fortune of being in safety and health now, occupational safety and health for about 30 years now. So I have a history. I had the good fortune of working with South Carolina OSHA before joining Life and Safety, and I've been doing this, like I said, for about 30 years. Uh, Today we're going to talk about managing your hazard communication program and your SDSs. Uh, Hazard communication is one of the low-hanging fruits that for OSHA compliance officers, and it is always, of course, one of the leading violations that OSHA issues. So this session is designed for supervisors, managers, and safety leaders responsible for implementing the hazard communication programs. In this one, instead of employee awareness training, this webinar, we're going to focus on how management oversees the entire HazCom system, of course, chemical inventories, SDS management, labeling systems, training, and auditing. Uh, the goal right now is to help you build it, make sure you're building your system that keeps it, one, always say, keep your employees safe, and then also keeps your organization compliant. Our objectives today, so by the end of this session, you should understand, a manager should understand their responsibilities under hazard communication standard. We'll review some of the key elements of an effective hazard communication program, including managing chemical inventories, ensuring SDS availability, managing labeling systems, and conducting program reviews. Uh, and also, we're going to touch a little bit on some of the new requirements coming out. But the goal is practical implementation, not just regulatory knowledge, how to implement this program. So why hazard communication matters? Of course, hazardous chemicals exist in every workplace. We're talking about from manufacturing and utilities to maintenance shops and cleaning operations. Poor chemical communication leads to those injuries. As you can see, some of the data that's listed here, we have over 43 million workers are exposed uh, annually to chemicals. We have it's estimated that over 50,000 injuries and illnesses annually, and approximately somewhere around a little more than 100 fatalities annually. And who knows over time how many chronic illnesses and fatalities that are from chemical exposure at work. Like I mentioned to you, hazard communication violations regularly appear in OSHA's top 10 violations. It's one of those, like I said, one of those low-hanging fruits for compliance officers. So when the hazard communication program fails, employees may not know the hazards they're working around, which can lead to those serious injuries or long-term health effects. The hazard communication standard is often called the right to know regulation. It ensures employees know the hazards of the chemicals they work with. Employers must provide information through labels, safety data sheets, written programs, and employee training. And guess who's responsible for ensuring that system actually works? That is the employer. So the management is responsible for ensuring that system actually works. So some of the management responsibilities, managers are responsible for ensuring the HazCom program exists and functions correctly. This includes maintaining the written program, verifying safety data sheets are available, maintaining chemical inventories, ensuring containers are labeled, and ensuring employees are trained. Some of the most common OSHA violations are the labeling and employee training.
Hey, Anthony,
Now,
I've got a
go,
quick question for you
go
on
ahead.
this. So I know that it says that to ensure that SDS is available, and a lot of times I get questions around this from clients, and they want to know like how what does that mean? Is it okay to put stuff online? And can you go, and that's a common question I get. Can you kind of go into a little bit about what OSHA's expectations are for availability?
Yes. So over time, when the standard first came out, everything was paper, right? But over time, technology has made safety and managing safety and health a lot easier. And OSHA has accepted the idea that, hey, if you have an electronic system or some type of electronic means for employees to get safety data sheets, that is acceptable as long as it is immediately available. That's the key. You can't have a computer locked up in an office somewhere where they can't get to it, have access to it. So as long as it's immediately available for the employees to have access to it. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So, in basic, in a nutshell, hazard communication compliance is a management responsibility, not just a safety department function. And I know sometimes we get challenged with that. Hey, it's all falls on the safety department, but it is a overall management responsibility. So we talk about some of the core elements of a HazCom program. A good strong HazCom programs include several interconnected systems. Hey, the written program, you have to have that. The written program explains how the facility handles hazard communication. That's one of the core elements. And then also you got a chemical inventory that gives you identifies all the hazardous chemicals present in the workplace. It's usually kept in some type of list or somewhere. And then we're talking about the safety data sheets. The safety data sheet provides that detailed hazard information. Labels communicate the hazards on the containers, how you're handling your labeling system, including your secondary labeling. All right. And then employees must be trained to understand this information. And then finally, the program must be reviewed periodically to ensure compliance. A chemical inventory was one of the backbones of the HazCom program. It should list every hazardous chemical used or stored at the facility. Whenever new chemicals are introduced, they must be added to the inventory, and the safety data sheet must be obtained. And uh, managers should periodically review the inventory to ensure it matches what is actually present in the workplace. And then, if you need to, you may have to remove some discontinued products. Okay.
So, Anthony, this is another question I think that we get a lot is, when you talk about a hazardous chemical, you know, some products are, of course, non-hazardous. Other products fall into a category where it's household use. Can you kind of talk about, from OSHA's perspective, what do you need to have these sheets on? What do you need training on? And if something is household use, how
Yeah.
does that work?
So if you're using a product as you would use in your household, you may have you have some exemptions under the OSHA standard, but a lot of times I find too, so you may have bleach at home or say a window cleaner, but then they have pallets of window cleaner or so much of it is you're using it more than what you would do at home. So you would need to cover that if it has any hazardous components in it under your hazard communication program. A lot of times, in particular, like office workers, they may, well, I don't know if they use it now, but whiteout. Just take whiteout for instance. Those are may used as household products. Then you wouldn't have to cover that in your safety data sheet. But now, if you got something that is using more than household products, then you would have to cover that under your under your hazard communication program.
So just so I understand, and so I like the example you gave of the window cleaner. If I'm in an office and I just clean the windows, once a week or something like that, that would be considered household, as much as household use. I wouldn't have to have it in the
Right.
inventory sheet. But if I work in the janitorial services, then, and I'm using that product, 7, 8, 9 times a day, then now that puts me in a different category and
It puts you in a different, correct.
I have to have it. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Safety data sheets, we talk about a little bit about those. They provide that detailed chemical information, including hazards, protective measures, and emergency response instructions. Every hazardous chemical must have a corresponding safety data sheet. And these must be accessible to employees during every shift. That's what we talked about that. Even if you're using them online or some type of electronic system, it needs to be available. The global harmonization standardized the SDS format into 16 sections, right? The first sections cover identification, hazards, composition, and first aid. The latter sections cover the technical properties, stability, and toxicology information. While employees may over-reference certain sections, managers must ensure complete SDS documentation exists. Okay? Some of the management best practice, of course, a strong SDS program ensures that chemicals are approved prior to being brought on site. SDSs are obtained before chemicals are introduced into the workplace, and many organizations maintain a centralized SDS database or binder. Outdated SDSs should be replaced when manufacturers issue updates. Chemical labels provide quick hazard identification. Under GHS, labels must include specific information, including the product identifier, signal words, hazard statements, precautionary statements, pictograms, and supplier contact information. So managers must ensure that containers transferred from the original package are properly labeled unless they are for immediate use. The workplace labeling system should be clearly defined and employees trained to recognize the labeling format used in the facility.
So
So,
Anthony, on this one, you'd mentioned before, this is one where OSHA writes a lot of citations around, and I know that I've walked in facilities and just seen, a bottle with the word bleach written on it. Um, you know, that doesn't comply. And how would somebody, if somebody is pouring something in a secondary container, what are the different ways to be able to get that label?
yeah, so you will get the information from the manufacturers from the original labeling, but you need some type of GHS compliant labeling where you have some of that information. Of course, you have the product name, and you may have some of the other information like a pictogram. You won't have all of that information on there, but you may have a signal word, a pictogram on it to kind of meet those GHS requirements on that. So.
And a lot of times, tell me if this is true or not, but I mean, a lot of times a supplier can provide labels, but also I've seen, some suppliers even give you, if you request it, those secondary containers that are already labeled and it's kind of printed into the plastic or glass or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. So I've seen a number of those. The supplier can help you with some of that. We've seen individuals try to go out and buy different type of labelings. You can, of course, now everybody's selling some type of GHS compliant labeling. You just got to make sure it is compliant and it meets the needs that you have. So, okay. Employee training responsibility. So the employees must receive training on chemical hazards before exposure occurs. That's that initial HazCom training. Specific training must cover, of course, that labeling systems, the SDS access, and chemical hazards in their specific work area. If new chemicals are introduced, additional training may be required. And of course, there's a training when any hazards change. Some of the common controls, how to control chemical hazards in the workplace. Hazard communication is only one part of the chemical safety program. Of course, management should also implement controls and safe work practices to reduce exposure. Some examples include eliminating hazardous chemicals altogether. Uh, Now you see a lot of individuals trying to use safer chemicals when possible. Engineering controls such as your ventilation systems, and then of course you got some administrative controls such as, of course, written procedures, training, and SOPs. Of course, when hazards cannot be eliminated through engineering or administrative controls, personal protective equipment may be required. That is the last line of defense. And managers must ensure that the personal protective equipment is selected appropriately and employees are trained to use it.
Hey, Anthony, we have one question that popped up.
Okay.
Can you talk about the requirements around language in translation for SDS?
Yes. So OSHA made that requirement. It came out, of course, that the training and the information has to be in a language that the employee understands. So if you have some employees that are not not strong in the English language, how do you know they really understand it? So you have to probably provide some information in a language that they can understand or in a method they can understand. So I've seen trainings done in particular online trainings. They may be done in a language that the employee can understand, and then you may have a supplemental document or SDS sheet in a language that they understand, and there may be somebody can interpret uh, uh, specific information in their specific work area. Okay.
Great, thanks.
All right, emergency planning. Of course, managers must ensure employees understand emergency procedures related to chemical exposure. This includes knowing where the safety data sheets are located, how to respond to spills, and where emergency equipment such as eye wash stations that are located, and of course, some of the first aid guidance from the safety data sheets.
Hey, Anthony, can you talk about the if you know about the regulations around like eye wash emergency showers and any type of have you seen a lot of compliance issues around maintaining those?
No. So as far as eye wash and showers are concerned, there's an ANSI standard on it that gives guidance on that. OSHA standards, OSHA standards, I think is 1910-151 is the general standard of it. It talks about providing emergency quick drenching when some employees are exposed to corrosive materials or any chemicals that they can get on the body. So that's where OSHA comes in at. But to find out all the guidance on it and the eye washing standard, ANSI has an eye washing standard for that. One of the things that we find a lot of times is, hey, employees are not inspecting these on a regular basis to make sure that they are operable, or they be blocked, or the water is coming out good, and you may get brown water. So that's just some of the things. And then also making sure if you have one in place that it has 15 minutes of continuous water. So you get a lot of portable systems now, but it needs to be 15 minutes of continuous water flow.
And so those squeeze bottles and things like that are good for temporary, but for immediate if you can't place a
Yeah,
something, but that would just be to get somebody to a sink or to an eye wash
yeah,
station, right?
that's just a kind of clean some dust out your eye or something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, but you need 15 minutes of continuous flow to be in compliance with a quick drenching. Okay. Some common HazCom compliance issues. Many OSHA citations result from basic program failures, such as, of course, missing SDSs, poorly maintained inventories, or improper labeling. I would say labeling is probably one of the leading violations that OSHA violations you will find. So managers should periodically review that SDSs are available and employees know how to access them. But you also should be constantly doing uh, evaluations on your labeling system. So, all right. Periodic audits help ensure HazCom programs remain compliant. Managers, you should check for inventories, verify SDS's accessibility, review the labeling practices, and confirm training documentation. You probably should look at more and more of auditing your program more on a at least an annual basis, if not more. So some upcoming HazCom regulatory updates. Of course, OSHA updated the hazard communication standard in 2024 to align with the GHS revision 7. I think GHS may be they may be already up to revision 13 now, but OSHA just aligned to revision 7. The goal is to improve clarity of hazardous classifications, safety data sheets, and labeling. Most changes occur upstream with chemical manufacturers updating hazard classifications and safety data sheets. Employers will primarily see changes when updated SDSs and labels begin arriving from suppliers. So, will employers need to reclassify their chemicals? No. As an employer, no. Chemical hazard classification is the responsibility of chemical manufacturers and importers. Employers will mainly receive updated SDSs and labels from suppliers and must update their HazCom program, SDSs, and employee training of accordingly. So some of the changes, of course, you got the uh, several hazard classification updates were made. You got a new hazard class called desensitized explosives. Explosives was added. Uh, Flammable gases now include category 1A and 1B. And that's including those pyrophoric and unstable gases are included. And then aerosols now include category 3 for non-flammable aerosols. All right. So the new SDS format and labeling, the SDS format remains the standardized 16 section structure. The SDSs must clearly list the responsible. Now the SDSs must clearly list the responsible party located in the United States, including their name, their U.S. address, and telephone number. If the chemical is imported, the U.S. importer becomes the responsible party, and their contact information must be listed on the SDS. However, additional information is now required in some sections, such as physical and chemical properties must be expanded, and then labeling improvements focus on clear hazard statements and flexibility for small containers where full labels cannot fit. Okay. And then the timeline for all of this is manufacturers and importers must update their hazard classifications, SDS, and labels first, right? So manufacturers for the substances, you have until May the 19th, 2026. And for mixtures, November the 19th, 2027. All right. So employers update their programs. Their timeline for substances is November the 20th, 2026, and mixtures May the 19th, 2028. So as the manufacturers update their information, the employers were required to update theirs 6 months after. And then employers update their programs and training after the updated SDS arrive from manufacturers and importers. So you may have to do some additional training if need be, if it makes some significant changes on the SDSs for you.
So, Anthony, if what will employers see? So they'll get information probably from the supplier or from the distributor, and that's what they'll see.
Yeah.
Probably maybe even starting as early as April and May, and some may have already started to try to comply with it.
Some may have even already started coming in May. So from there, employers will probably started seeing some updated SDSs. And then, of course, it may change up the labeling system on what you may have. So once you start seeing that,
sorry, go ahead.
So employers need to be aware of this and be on the lookout for any updated information from the manufacturer or the importers. And
if it's an employer that doesn't that has a lot of chemicals on site, but you're not getting communications about this, would you recommend that people reach out, to their suppliers, or how would they, it's kind of, I think one of the worries that people might have is that something may have changed and they just didn't get the communications from their manufacturer.
So OSHA has given manufacturers and importers to May the 19th. So that's starting here fairly soon. So I would say once May the 19th hits, OSHA is saying employers, you have 6 months to get yours be updated. They're giving you employers to November the 20th. So after May comes, if you haven't started receiving any additional information from your manufacturers or importers, then you may want to reach out to them and ask, hey, has there been any changes? Is there anything new or that we need to see as far as the products that we have? And some companies, in particular larger companies that have a lot of inventory, chemical inventory, it may be a process that they have to put in place to reach out to get this information.
Okay, thanks.
So what do employers need to do? Of course, we just talked about some of this. Monitor for updated SDSs from suppliers. And then employers, of course, we got to determine if your SDSs or labels are impacted. That's what some of the things you do. Then reviewing some of your chemical inventories and replacing those old SDSs in your system. Now, your training should be reviewed to ensure employees understand the updated hazard classifications and labeling information. And then workplace labeling practices should also be verified. And you may even have to go back and update in your HazCom written programs may be necessary.
Hey, Anthony, we have one more question that just came in.
Okay.
Should there be, at a minimum, a SDS revision date of year 2026 to be compliant with the new sheets?
OSHA wasn't clear on that it had to have a new revision date. If there's something that has changed, that's when you have to get the new revisions. So
okay, so my understanding from what you said is some chemicals won't be impacted at all, so there won't be any revisions at all. But if any of those new classes, or if the old SDS had a foreign address on it, and now that's switching to an importer, then that new revision date should hit those automatically when the manufacturer updates that.
If there's been any changes, then SDS needs to be updated.
Okay.
So some of our key takeaways, of course, is HazCom is a management responsibility. Managers, the employer is responsible for managing that process. The SDS systems must be maintained, of course. The chemical inventories must be accurate. One of the biggest things is employees must be trained. And then SDS information must be easily accessible. And then also to make sure you are in compliance, a program audit can help prevent those compliance gaps. Right?
Anthony, I've got one more question for you around the training piece. If I'm understanding this correctly, let's say the SDS sheet gets revised, but the only revision in it is that the address switched from a foreign address to a U.S. based
Mm-hmm.
address. Let's say it's the distributor's address. That wouldn't necessarily trigger a training, would it?
That
Like
was
a
not
training.
that. Yeah, if it's just something simple that does not impact the employee's awareness of that product, then there's no additional training requirements. But what if you now we're looking at, hey, now the chemical classification has changed. Maybe that may be something to, hey, trigger some training for the employee.
Okay, so like if it was, somebody had a chemical and it fell into one of these new categories and that changed maybe the SDS and even the label, then
Mm-hmm.
that's where you would need to make sure that the employees understood that.
Right. Correct. So some of the things I probably would recommend is, hey, let's update our hazard communication training altogether and start listing, talking about some of these new categories. So now when these new chemicals come in, employees are aware of them and they understand what they're looking at on the SDSs. So
Okay. So it could be an impact to the SDS only, it could be an impact to SDS and label,
right,
or it could be an impact to SDS label and training.
exactly.
Okay. Great. Does anybody have any other questions they would like to cover? Okay, well, so what we're going to do is we'll end the webinar here in just a second. We appreciate everybody coming out. What we typically do is we make this recording available at a future date on our website, usually within like 5 to 10 business days, and we'll try to send that information out so that if you have other people in your organization that wanted to attend the webinar but they weren't able to, that you have access to the information. And of course, if you have any particular questions about your organization or about your chemicals or GHS, you can always reach out to Anthony. And if we don't know the answer, we know who to call to find the answer, right? Anthony, appreciate your time, and we will talk later.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.